Hello and welcome to Focus on Liberia. Ansony Sieh hosting another edition of the Hour of Politics. Dr. Duba Chris Yan, a scientist, a politician, an activist, is my guest. This is an exclusive with Dr. Duba Chris Yan. He has some progressive resume as well, and he's here for us to talk about a couple of issues. One of the issues that we wish to start with is this COVID crisis. So we'll talk about the fight against the world coronavirus crisis as it continues. He is a scientist, an infectious disease scientist. By the way, that is his area of specialty. So when we're talking disease and how to fight, testing and all that, vaccine, he is impressive in that area. Also, Liberia political actors and presidential election 2023. I told you, he's a politician. He is from the, we call it in Liberia, the progressive community. What are they doing? Any preparation, any works in place as we speak? Or they're going to sit by, as I always try to tell Dr. Yan, why the boys eat their lunch? He's here to respond. But another thing is, he is from what they call the Social Democratic Progressive Community. So what are they doing as the election approaches? Dr. Yan, it's good to have you. Welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you for having me, Dad.
All right, Dr. Yan, as you are aware, the COVID crisis is at a level that the whole world is panicking. How are you doing? How is your family? And how's everything else?
The family is doing fine. I want to say Happy New Year to your listeners, to the people of Liberia, the U.S., and the world. We are all contending with the COVID-19 crisis in the world. The infections are increasing very rapidly. Having dealt with the Delta and still dealing with the Delta variant, now we have the Omicron, which is creating havoc in the world, particularly in the United States and most parts of Europe.
Thank you so very much. So let's start with what we got going on with the COVID. You talk about the new variant. So that again, this new variant that we're dealing with, how serious it is compared to previous variants that we had in the past?
Certainly, we have had previous variants of the coronavirus, SARS coronavirus 2, which causes the COVID-19 disease. One of the most recent and deadly one was the Delta variant, and the which had a mutation, and the double mutant variant also, which was creating havoc in India several months ago. The Delta variant spread around the world very rapidly, and it caused infections, hospitalizations, and deaths in many communities. Now, as this virus transmits from community to community, particularly the unvaccinated communities, it tends to change its genetic makeup in a long portion of its entire gene, particularly at the spike protein. So we now have this multiple mutated variant, which is about 15 plus mutations on the spike protein, which we now call Omicron variant. The Omicron variant is very transmissive, it's contagious, but we're not seeing that it is more virulent than the other, meaning that it has been causing mild symptoms, mild flu-like symptoms, and as opposed to the Delta variant, which has caused major hospitalizations and deaths. Nevertheless, much of what we see as hospitalization and death is among the unvaccinated population, and for which we continue to encourage citizens around the world to get vaccinated. And those who are their full dose of vaccination, be it Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, to go back for your booster doses.
And talking about booster, and you were at this event when you were talking about boosters, and as I listened, you said, well, if you took Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson may be your booster. So I think you guys call it a mismatch. Talk to me about that. What is the scientific finding about that? And is that making any breakthrough in the fight against the COVID?
Certainly, yes.
Okay.
Those studies have been done. I know about 9 months ago, I was asked the same question at the time, and I responded that it was possible to mix match, meaning you can take one set of vaccine produced by one company, and then you can take another type of vaccine produced by another company. But let us do the studies and see if we can, validate that hypothesis. Only then, with the scientific evidence, can we say yes, for certain you can do that. And those studies have been done by many countries, particularly in Israel and some European countries. And we have found out that if you took Pfizer or Moderna, you can take either Pfizer or Moderna as your booster. So if you took Pfizer, your 2 doses of Pfizer, you can take Moderna as your booster, your 3rd dose. If you took 2 doses of the Moderna, which is the 4th dose, you can take Pfizer as your booster. If you took AstraZeneca, for example, AstraZeneca is 2 doses, you can take Pfizer or you can take Moderna as your booster. You can also, according to one other study, take Johnson & Johnson. If you took Johnson & Johnson, Johnson & Johnson is just 1 dose, and then their 2nd dose is their booster. If you took Johnson & Johnson 1 dose, you can also take either Pfizer or Moderna as your booster. And so this mix and match is now possible. And we encourage that because studies have shown that even the mix and matching is safe, it's effective, and it boosts up the immunity even higher.
Thank you so very much. And Dr. Yan, we see in most of the developed countries, vaccines are more available compared to our home continent of Africa. But let's focus more on our country, Liberia. Some time ago, you volunteered to help, and it became clear that help was not accepted by our government. What have you been doing since the government did not show any interest in allowing you to contribute to the fight against COVID-19 in Liberia?
Well, I did contribute to the COVID-19 fight in Liberia without needing any government authorization.
Okay.
Along with other organizations and with my own entity, the Shepherd's Baronet, we conducted several vaccination awareness programs. We conducted diagnostic programs. And when I went into the country in April, I carried out a lot of the awareness programs around the country, particularly through radio and through community engagement, through which the citizens became now convinced that the vaccine was safe and they could now go to take the vaccine. And we saw the first wave of citizens going to take the vaccine. Since then, we have been also working to create the condition for countries to, particularly our countries in Africa, to pay attention to supporting our own scientists, homegrown scientists, and scientists of African origin or scientists from the country that are in the diaspora, so that we can produce our own testing kits and produce our own vaccines. As you know, the vaccines produced have been produced in the Western countries, and there have been this vaccine inequity, whereby the Western countries that produce the vaccine have been hoarding the vaccines and donating them in piecemeal, while the rest of the world, is left without vaccines. There's then this push for them to release, when I say them, the Western countries, to release the patents and other intellectual information on the technology. And they are then resisting. And my thing is that we as Africans and African scientists are highly knowledgeable of this kind of technology and skills. Only if our governments can provide the necessary funding and requisite atmosphere where we also be able to produce our own vaccines and produce our testing kits. That way we will not be dependent on the West always.
Yeah, and to that point you just made, that if only African governments can support African scientists, then African scientists will be able to, like their European partners, produce these vaccines and other things that are needed to fight diseases. Is that the case here in the US, that the Western governments support their scientists, especially in crises like this, and Africans are not doing that? Is that the case? I want to get clarity on that.
The comparison is quite a contrasting one.
Okay.
In the Western countries, take the United States and Britain, for example,
okay,
they pumped in billions of dollars. The United States provided almost $5 to $6 billion for Pfizer and Moderna to produce the vaccine, and Johnson & Johnson as well.
Right.
The European Union did the same thing. What did the African governments do? Nothing. I was one of those who was the initial scientist who called on the African government, particularly the Liberian government, to make this very resources available so that we could produce Liberia's testing kits, and that could be then upgraded and scale up for the production of the testing kits for Africa. Liberia did not respond; they rejected that. So, and I've come to the realization that we cannot blame the West. Even if they say they're not giving us vaccine, they're not giving us this, and they're giving us that in piecemeal, because we also have the resources. Only if those resources, those financial and other resources, are properly utilized and placed in the priority areas, like what we have this pandemic, where we also then be able to produce our own equipment, our own reagents, our own materials, testing kits, vaccines, etc.
And Dr. Young, you believe Africa does have the professionals to get the job done, except that they're not getting the support from their government?
With 99.99% certainty, Africa has the intellectual skills. Africa has the technical skills. Africa has, again, the money and the resources. But the money and the skills are far apart. The policymakers are not making the money available.
So does it mean our policymakers, and I'll be a little harsh here, are they just stupid, or they are visionless? They don't know what is good for the continent and their individual country? I mean, why stopping them?
One can put it, as I've always said, to the lack of vision and the lack of nationalism and patriotism. And for Africa particularly, I think a good number of our leaders lack that Pan-African concept of working together and making little bigger for the good of the continent and the world, which the Pan-Africanists in the past did, like the types of Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, Haile Selassie, etc. What most of the countries, policymakers and leaders are focused on in Africa, and the records are there to show, is their individual self looting the country's resources and misapplying the resources. As a result, we can't say that we don't have the resources, and that's what I always say. We have the resources, meaning financial and otherwise,
right,
but the application and the appropriation of those resources have not been properly done, for which we are left to beg the West for almost everything. We are a donor-dependent continent, donor-dependent country, and that should stop.
And let's come to how Africa is doing in the fight against COVID compared to the Westerners who have all the money, who have all the vaccines to their disposal, the testing kits and all that. I'm not sure they have any deficiency or limitation with all these tools that are needed to fight. And yet, they are the one who been dealt with the harshest blow of all. Is this something that Africa is doing better than they are? Or are we just being lucky? Because if you look at the fight against COVID, Africa is in a much better position in terms of deaths, in terms of infectious rate and all that. And you know the records. Talk to me about that. What is going on there? Dr. Young? Folks, bear with us here. Bear with us here very quickly. Let me see if I can get Dr. Yan quickly. It seems to be we have a little glitch. Bear with us here quickly. Let me see if I can get Dr. Yan quickly. Okay. Dr. Yan, I'm sure you heard my question.
Yeah, okay. Now I'm hearing you.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't hear the last part of the question. Sorry,
the last part of the question, if you compare the Western world that has everything in this fight against COVID, and you look at Africa, pretty much that's at a disadvantage in terms of vaccine, testing and all that needed, to fight the COVID, Africa is in a much better place. What do you think is responsible for that? Is it just man luck? Or are we doing a better job than the Westerners?
There are several factors responsible for that.
Okay.
Africa has been confronted with a lot of infectious diseases over the years. Over multiple decades. And second thing is that the last outbreak of the Ebola virus disease also added to our knowledge of handling infectious diseases. So Africa has had experience, irrespective of the lack of resources as compared to the West. One of the factors that we are looking at also is the youthful age of the African continent, where you have almost over 50 to 55% of the population is at a youthful age, which gave us a breathing space a little bit. And then you have this intervention, which we did immediately when there was this outbreak. Although there was a delay in intervening, but we as scientists pressed on our various governments to close down the various borders, lock down the continent. And then we also then introduced this wearing of masks. When the West was saying that only the healthcare professionals should use these surgical masks, we went to work and told our people that you can also use local materials and make masks. And you saw, the African print masks being used, which were then translated to different countries making, masks which were not necessarily the surgical masks and N95 masks. So this introduction of the mask wearing and the consistent advocacy that we did, all of these factors help, irrespective of the fact that we did lack the resources to like testing kits and vaccines to intervene.
All right. So Africa, because of the population being youthful and experience with past, diseases that we fought, and you said those and maybe a few others are responsible for the reason Africa is having less death rate compared to the Westerners. Dr. Young?
Yes, like I said, there are several of these factors that we are looking into. And this is why we have also called for these studies to be done, pre-vaccination, so that we can understand also, is there any particular kind of genetic uh, uh, disposition, genetic advantage that we have, which has prevented us from the havoc of this virus, the SARS coronavirus 2, as we've seen in the West. So again, this could be another factor, but all of this have to be studied, and we have to get a scientific clue to that. Okay. We have had many coronavirus infections in Africa. The flu virus, the cold virus, and all of SARS coronaviruses are all in Africa, and we've been infected with these without not even knowing that we have had these. So have we had some sort of immunity in the background that has helped us? All of these genetic factors also, in addition to the mask wearing, the youthful population, and the interventions that the public health interventions that we carry out on the African continent, all of that need to be summed up in total as a contributing factor to why we probably may have been spared as compared to the West, which is heavily infected. If you compare the Italian population to, let's just say, the Liberian population, for example, the Italian population is an aged population. They have much is an older population. And you saw the amount of deaths, in Italy as compared to a country like Liberia, for example, which has predominantly a youthful population. So if you just do that comparison alone, just on the basis of age, you can see that. Now, you may ask, what about South Africa? Yes, South Africa is one of the heavily hit countries in Africa, just as Egypt was. So you have pockets of places in pockets of countries in Africa that were hard hit. But on a general scale, you saw that most of the continent was spared. And these interventions that I spoke about earlier can be contributing factors to that.
All right, Dr. Jan, let's leave it there. And thanks, for your contribution in the fight in this pandemic. I just wish more study could have been done to really find out why is Africa doing better, maybe best compared to all other regions, if I can put it that way, in the fight against COVID-19. Could it be that is Africa more vaccinated in the past against other diseases, and did they gain immunity, and that is helping? Could it be our food type? Those kind of information, if only our scientists could do the research and bring that to us, then that could present an opportunity, to prepare ourselves for the fight against, future diseases that may come. Dr. Juba Christian is our guest here in this exclusive here, a focus on Liberia. Dr. Yan, what we also want to talk about is politics in our country, Liberia. You are aware, our country, you politicians will tell us it's at a crossroad. When you people say that, what do you mean when you say Liberia is at a crossroad? Let's start with that, Dr. Yan.
Well, before going to that, let me come back on the last statement you made.
Okay.
On the question of the studies need to be done, which I have said earlier. This is one of the reasons why we have advocated for financial and other resources being given. In the absence of vaccination, we would have known what's responsible for our immunity. All of the diseases that we have been infected with, all of the vaccines that we are taking, what contribution do they make to us resisting this particular virus? So that is why it is important that our governments provide the necessary funding that will help us to do these scientific studies ourselves. We cannot wait for the West to come into Africa and do the studies for us. They are doing the studies for themselves already. And that is where we are getting most of the data from to extrapolate and apply in our situation. Now, I will ask our people to continue to wear their masks, take your vaccine, take your boosters, keep your social distances, and let's continue to keep all of these healthcare regulations so that we continue to remain on the good side of coronavirus. Coming to the question of our country being at a crossroad.
Right.
Certainly, we are at a critical stage in the history of our country, where we emerged from a civil war, 14 years, which created havoc in the country, destroyed lives and property, and decimated most of our structures, governance structures. We had 12 years of peace, 12 years or more of peace. We had 3 elections, democratic elections, which are all a plus, in our growing democracy. Today, we find a situation whereby the country is being misgoverned, press freedom is being violated, human rights is being violated, the economy is completely destroyed. The government projects that it is growing, but the actual data suggests that it is in the negative. We see insecurity in the country. We see rape that the government is not paying attention to, rape of women, daughters, and sometimes boys. We also see that certain institutions are being muscled up or closed down. Then we see the attempt by a group of opposition to come together, and that has not seen any success. And so all of this can be put together to say that our country is at a very critical stage at the moment. And how do we approach that?
And talking about that, Dr. Yan, I like how you eloquently listed them, if not chronologically, right? But that has been the history. These things are not new. None of the things that you said, and you know it, that is new. These are the very things that have subsisted from day one to this point. So to continue to say we are at a crossroad, is it just a statement to put our people in a panic mode so that you can gain their attention and sway them your way politically? Because this is not new.
At every stage in our history and governance system and political work, we've always come at a crossroad.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not a new thing, and it's not because it's been happening. So we can only say that. Why should we say we are at a crossroad? We've always come at a crossroad.
Okay.
In the course of our history, even the foundation of Liberia itself was a crossroad, and we were able to cross that bridge, and Liberia was founded in around 1822 and gained its independence in 1847, or announced its independence in 1847. It does not necessarily mean that we should continue on that path. And that is why democratic forces and democratic-minded forces need to actively and sincerely engage the situation so as to arrest it once and for all, just as we have seen other countries are doing. Ghana had series of governance crises with military coup upon military coup. Today, Ghana is a stable country. We in Liberia and Rwanda went through the same crisis during the same period. Rwanda has stabilized over the last 20, 25 years. Within the same 20, 25 years, Liberia has not stabilized.
Dr. Young, how can you say Liberia has not stabilized? So tell me, what type of stability are you talking about?
You're talking about economic stability. You're talking about political stability. And political stability does not necessarily mean because there's no war, people are not shooting each other, there's no coup, so then there is stability. I think when we talk about political stability, it goes beyond just civil crisis. Political stability incorporates respect for human dignity. It incorporates security. And that includes personal and national security. It incorporates respect for the press, not closing down newspapers or radio stations simply because you feel they are against your government or they are being critical of your government. Political stability goes towards also economic growth, economic stability. Political stability also incorporates agricultural stability, agricultural prosperity. Let's put it that way. We can feed ourselves. And if these things are absent, it creates the ground for instability.
Thank you. Thank you. And I like how you lay it out there. But Dr. Yan, I have to ask here, if you look at, let's stay on the political stability. If you look at years back, you look at Taylor time, you look at those time, you look at Omen Todmon and Todbot time, and then Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and then will you say in terms of political stability, we are moving in a much better place because the press was being muscled by the government or heavily in the past compared to recent years? Are we on an upward trajectory in terms of positivity in the political stability in our country or not?
Well, it's a mixed bag.
Okay.
During the Tubman era, for example, we had an economic boom, but there was a lot of heavy-handed government repression, on opposition.
Okay.
The story of Dido Toa, the story of Fambule, who were repressed when even Coleman, when they had intended to challenge the system, is a typical example of that. During the Talbot regime, we had a good economic basis. Talbot was putting the country on a path of industrialization. Nevertheless, it had its own drawbacks. Then the military government came in, and we saw repression leading to the Civil War. After the Civil War, we saw President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf coming in, and we thought this would be the era of reconstruction. A lot was done, but yet still a lot needed to be done. Today we see the government of Weah, President Weah, that is in, and it is behaving as if it is the best government in the entire during the entire existence of the country, when the statistics and the reality shows otherwise. So that is why I say it's a mixed bag. Presently, you also have a situation where, as I indicated, the economy is completely down. You have citizens and various agencies of government, workers in various agencies of government striking. The last strike action, which was at the Rabat International Airport, when one of the international aircraft was held on the tarmac until the workers were demanding their pay of 6 months arrears. University teachers have gone on strike, and they continue to negotiate with government. The government has said that it provided free education when you still have students paying school fees. The educational system itself is in crisis. Overall, I don't have the actual number, but I believe it was about 50,000 or more students that took the WIAC.
They call it WAS now.
The WIAC, exactly. And a minute fraction of them passed that exam.
Yes. What I read said, I think 1.2% pass out of the 100%. That is devastating.
Exactly. Exactly. That's why I said minute portion of that pass. So if you look at all of this throughout these governing administration that I have listed, you will see that it's been a mixed bag. You can't say that about Ghana. You cannot say that about Rwanda today. And I will just use those two countries as an example.
But Dr. Yan, let's pinpoint one thing among the many, right? Which is the participation of political parties and winning elections as well. If you contrast the past to now, let's start with Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Opposition parties were winning elections. And then in Joshua administration, that trend continues. We have more political parties. We have more protests. Protest has never been anything that any government anywhere in the world would like. But we continue to have protests in Liberia. I think we are in a much better place if you look at the variables. Will you say yes or no?
There has been heavy hand on protests in the country. The government has not allowed protests. The government has always prevented protests, and the evidence is there to show. So we cannot necessarily say that's progress. The evidence definitely indicates that the government is anti-protest and has not allowed the voices of the people to be heard. Nevertheless, the people have come out to protest and to express their grievances. There have been protests against rape. There have been protests against the delay of salary payment in different communities, in different agencies of government. Even the legislative staff have also protested. And that's not something that was welcomed by the government. The government security forces have always come in to stop the protest instead of listening to the people and providing the necessary solutions. You can have, just take the legislature, for example. You can have legislatures, for example, the House of Representatives, members of the House of Representatives, each making pretty close to about $15,000 a month, and you have staff making $200, $300. It's a huge disparity. The representatives in the United States are not even making such an amount. And then you have certain budgetary allotments that are given periodically. In recent times, we saw in the Senate or the legislature about $30,000 being given, that which brought a lot of discussion in the country. Some said they were returning it. Most of them held that money, and that money was used for what? For so-called legislative engagement, when it should have been placed in the budget for actual national development. So when this was protested, the government did not like that. The government came back on those who were protesting, particularly the legislative staff that were looking at that kind of phenomenon and were protesting for their areas owed them. So if you look at all of this, you can conclude that this particular government has not been allowing protests. Instead, it has been clamping down on protests.
So that again is clear. From what I'm hearing from you, the government has all the opportunity to do better for our people, but in many areas, it is out of feeling or not doing well enough. That brings us now to the only opportunity we may have to see if we can have a change of government as required by our constitution to have an election. So here comes 2023. But before that, may I ask, what, if any, that you know of that this government is doing better with compared to those ones that is not doing well with at all? Do you know of anyone, any area where the government is maybe scoring a B? I'm not in the business of grade, but it's doing maybe okay, satisfactorily to your satisfaction. Anyone, any area?
A lot. The government is you can be graded an A in corruption. The government can be graded a B in incompetence. The government can be graded a C in allowing press freedom. The government can be graded a D in not providing security for the people. You see rape. You see the security of the citizens not being in place, that the government will ask each person to get their own CCTV camera to get protection for themselves. So if you ask me to certainly grade this government, there are many other categories that we could grade the government through, but I think this...
That again, the core of my question is, you have articulated, suggesting to me, based on my attentive listening, that the government is not doing as much as it should be doing nearly in every area. And I'm asking you, do you know of any area or on anything whatsoever that this government is doing better now, or will you be able to identify one? Where is the government doing better? That's my question.
I think my answer was quite succinct.
That
the government is doing better at the things that are not good for the country.
That the government is scoring A with corruption? How can you interpret that?
I think you and myself and listeners can better interpret that as well. That suggests that there should be a stamp on corruption.
Well, my interpretation, if you don't mind, Dr. Yan, I don't mean to interrupt you. My interpretation, when you give the government A in corruption, that means the government is fighting better and score A in the fight against corruption. That is my interpretation.
No.
Okay.
It's philosophical.
All right. Then what do you mean?
I said the government is doing a lot in corruption. The government is it does not stand to be interpreted as the government is fighting corruption. I mean, that would be one of the most most awkward statement that anyone looking at the Liberian politics will make, that the Liberian is fighting corruption. So if it were, that would have been emphatically said. It's unfortunate maybe that I gave my answer in a more philosophical term than giving it particularly more directly. It is difficult to see what this government presently is doing right for our people.
Wow. Dr. Yan, you can't find any that the government is doing better with in Liberia. The government prides itself on the construction of roads. You can't give it to the government. The government is saying it's paying wide fees, for the children of Liberia, free tuition for all universities and colleges, public, by the way, and the list goes on. And you say you can't find any, and all of these things are what? Not true?
Road construction, let's take that. All the roads that are being constructed in the country today were agreements made by the previous government, signed and sealed. And those roads were under construction when the past government of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf left. I mean, I am not a UP partisan. I'm only looking at the government. And so that credit cannot go to this government for road construction.
Why not? When the government is completing the task? When the government is completing the task?
No. What I think, we should make the distinction, and it should be very clear.
Okay.
That the government cannot just take credit for these roads that are being constructed. These processes were already in place. When you talk about a project, you consider who designed the project,
okay,
who sourced the finances, who initiated the implementation of that process, of that project. And it was done by the previous government. All the government needed to have done was to guide it and continue its implementation, which it is doing. But you cannot say that it is the one that sourced all of this and initiated the project. And that is why when it comes to road construction, let's just take road construction, for example, the government has to be sincere in clarifying that these projects were arranged and already in process when it came in. It should not just take that as a credit to itself, leaving out the Sirleaf government.
Dr. Yan.
When it comes to education, we heard a public pronouncement, official pronouncement that the government had given free education. Let's take the University of Liberia. Free education will mean that there will be no school fees. The university will be upgraded. Students will have access to internet. Students will have access to computers. The university campus will be upgraded. But none of these have been done. We only hear the pronouncement that there was free education. But the conditions, the learning conditions and atmosphere at the university remains dilapidated. Even during this time of the coronavirus, students were asked to go online. When the proper arrangement was not made to even facilitate students studying online, under a free educational process, like you see in Europe and other places, in Ghana, for example, these facilities are made available. So how do you say an education is free when you don't have the necessary atmosphere created for a free education?
Thank you, Dr. Yan. And Dr. Yan, may I do this? What's the definition of work, scientifically speaking? Work.
What is your question again?
What is the scientific definition of work? W-O-R-K.
Why are you asking me for a scientific definition?
I'm asking a question because when I posed the question to you about this government boasting of bidding roles, you said, well, you can't give them the credit because the previous government secured the contracts, negotiated the funding, and that the previous government pretty much did everything. And I'm asking you because my understanding of work, by definition in science, when it is not completed, then it's not done. This government is doing some work. It's completing the roles. It's supervising the project to be done. It is the government. So to say that the government is not doing anything and that those roads that you talk about were not paved, not all of them were paved, like you really said, the fundings were secure and all that, but the work was never done. Some of them, and the work being done now. So we have to give this government credit, whichever way we see the government or not. Is that not accurate?
Go back to my response and you will hear that I have indicated that this government is continuing what was sourced, the finances that were sourced to carry out this road construction, the design, and the implementation were already in process. And this government is continuing what was already in process. So this government should also credit the past government and not crediting to itself the entire process of road construction. I made that very clear.
All right. Then you are clear now. I got it. Maybe I didn't pick that up. Dr. Yan, so quite clearly, it is known now that you believe the government should be doing much, much better than what it's doing. And in fact, you don't think they're doing anything much at all. So we might have to need a new government, but it is also required by our constitution. Elections are coming. Let's start with the CDC. When you look at its strategies being put into play, out of its efforts and activity to maintain power, is there anything that scares you that they may succeed in succeeding themselves? One example I want you to flow on is this presidential scholarship held by Minister of Presidential Affairs, Nathaniel McGill. He's going around the country and giving money to students. Talk to me about that. I think that is a winning strategy politically if you look at it.
The current government, if it were doing all the good things that you were trying to list, would not be benching on mere nationwide travel and giving of quote-unquote scholarship. That brings me back to the question of the free education. If you say you give free education, why then scholarship? That's a contradiction. Scholarships are given to people who don't have the means of going to school or who don't have the money to pay to go to school. So if you give free education that's not paid for, then why scholarships?
The free education for community colleges and universities, this one that they're doing now around the country is for high schools.
I think the government should have focused on increasing the budget for education, having a real good educational plan that will restructure our curriculum and pay teachers, upgrade the standards of schools, then going around giving scholarship. Where is the money coming from for these scholarships? Why don't focus on upgrading the schools, paying teachers so that teachers don't go on strike, as we have seen in the past. University teachers are on strike. They are still in, I believe, still in negotiation with government for their arrears of salary. Although you may say that these scholarship schemes are now for the high school students, I would think that it is a wrong political strategy because at every point in time, pretty close to election, you have government officials going around giving vehicle rights, in the past, giving scratch cards, making doing these little projects that they would then turn around to say, this is what I have done. When over the time, all of the time they've been in office, they did not pay attention to the actual needs of the people.
Does the politics of Becker rice, T-shirts, motorbikes, and you name the rest work in Liberia?
It had its own effect in the past, but I think from our voters' education and advocacy, for free and fair elections, the Liberian population have cut on that. We saw the same phenomenon in Ghana as well, where students refused backup rights that were brought by one government official who was running, and the students said they needed their schools to be upgraded. They didn't need backup rights anymore. We saw in Liberia the amount of money that was used by one of the senators from the CDC when he was going against Dillon, to unseat Dillon, Senator Dillon.
Oh, that's a representative, Thomas Fowler, you meant, right?
Yeah, representative during the senatorial elections, I wanted to say. And we saw what happened. That money did not necessarily make the candidate to win. During this election, just the recent election of by elections, we saw in Grand Juda, Grand Cape Mount, and many other places where the government has infused a lot of cash to those candidates. Those candidates did not win.
Dr. Yan.
So you will conclude on this. We can drag towards the conclusion that the government needs a better strategy that it will utilize to win the coming general and presidential election.
Dr. Yan, let me talk to you briefly about the budget, and we'll get to the other segment here. The budget is a powerful tool in terms of governance, and sometimes it becomes a political tool, and that's why we see here with this current budget, based on our reading of it here, a focus on Liberia. What we're seeing is that there's so much money put into this budget for county tours. We see so much, allotted to people who are in government agencies that they control. So this is CDC, politically speaking. I think this is a strategy. They will have so much money on hands to fight. They are in a better position compared to the opposition here. And the opposition community, I don't see why you're saying about this budget. Talk to me. Don't you think there could be another winning strategy by the CDC to remain in power?
We spoke about the misappropriation, particularly budgetary misappropriation in the past. And this is a classic example of budgetary misappropriation. Such money that could have gone to fighting the pandemic, such money that could have gone towards upgrading education, paying teachers, and even upgrading the economy is going towards county tour. What good can a county tour do? What has the government, the president, and other government officials not done in terms of touring the counties that they will do now? So certainly, if that is a strategy of the government to engage the people at this time, it is incumbent upon the opposition, to highlight this and use that as a basis of advocacy in the coming elections. It is unfortunate that the opposition itself, what I would term as the mainstream opposition, has not focused on some of these issues. There have been statements made here and there against the budget, which I would credit to individual pundits and analysts too. Some of the political parties, I believe, have made statements also, but that critical analysis of the budget and a much more deeper tie to the politicization of the budget has not been done. And I think that's an area where opposition politicians should focus as well.
So talking about focus, that is a diplomatic language of saying politicians have failed, to make the people understand what is at stake here with this budget. And let me bring something to your attention, Dr. Yan. Each county in Liberia is being allotted $200,000 only, $200,000 for each county, and it said is for county development. But it is that very $200,000 they had given to Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Amunje initiative. And in fact, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Women Foundation has 1 million. So Ellen Johnson Sirleaf is getting 2.1 million in the budget. But the counties that the very lawmakers represent each get 200,000 to develop the counties. It's obvious how our counties are like that. I don't see Dr. Yan taking this issue to the people that, look, this is what these people that represent you are doing. This shows their insensitivity. Your political institution, you credit a few people spoke here and there. I mean, it's not going to call it, Dr. Yan. This is serious business.
Yeah, the statement you made is quite in place. County development funds were meant to be allotted to the various counties. It is not this government that initiated it. It started from the past government in a way, so that they could use that for development. This particular county development fund has been an issue of contention in various counties. The citizens in the counties don't know what these funds have been applied to. And there have been a lot of controversies about these funds. Even the social development funds that come from concession companies that are in those counties have all been in question. And that is why our suggestion has always been that there should be a national development program that the country, irrespective of government, will focus on over a period of time. You can say that we have this 10-year development plan, and that should be a plan developed with participation of all actors, political actors, social groups, etc. But apportioning funds for each county, 250,000, what can that do for a county that the government, if the government had designed a national development plan, could do? So again, this is where we talk about the misappropriation, misallocation, budgetary allocation. So that needs to be looked at. Yes, like I said, other political parties, some political parties have done statements on this, but I think much needs to be done. And I have said it initially that the political parties, particularly those who are not in government, need to do much in amplifying these issues, critically dissecting it, and providing suggestions that will move the country forward in terms of a proper and appropriate budgetary allocation.
Dr. Yan, I couldn't agree with you more. When I look at the budget, I look at the disparity in terms of the allotments to counties, sectors that are intended, to improve the people of Liberia conditions. And then when you look at the allotments of government officials, in particular, President Weah in 2021, for the office of the president was $412,000 United States dollars.
Right.
In 2022 budget, it jumped from $412,000 to $5.9 million.
Right.
Can you imagine that? But yet the counties maintain the same $200,000. President Weah is just one man. His budget left from $400,000 to 5.9 million. That is more than 2,000% increase.
Yeah.
But the country did not get a single increase. And I call it gold mine because that's why the opposition could step in and say, hey, look at the president, look at the proposed president. See how much he has given himself and see the little that he has given to your county. But again, here's the opposition. But that brings us to the CPP. My question on the CPP, I don't want us to waste our time on that. You and myself, I had the opportunity to talk about them. My question is the CPP now a failed project? If yes, why it failed? Briefly, if you can. And is its failure different or similar to all of collaborations that failed in the past?
Just as you said, we have spoken on this multiple times, and we predicted in previous discussions with you on your network and on other networks that the CPP was formed to fail, given the basic foundation or the lack thereof upon which it was founded. As you can see, like I said some time ago, you have institutions that lack, a lot of institutions, political institutions in Liberia that lack fundamental party philosophy, methodology. And so people tend to organize around individuals and build personality cults than building institutions. This has characterized much of what you saw in the CPP. You have a lot of what I call these freelance politicians, and who I may now term as Omicron politicians, because they change from one thing to another, they mutate every time. So it creates a lack of consistency. It creates a lack of independence in thought, and it creates also a lack of commitment to the parties. As a result, the move from one party to another, it creates a big confusion if you try to bring these parties together. So the CPP, everything that we have said has come to pass. And it is unfortunate because the Liberian people had their hopes in a united front, a united CPP, and they thought there was one of the single most process that would have taken the people to the elections and then defeating the current government. Coalition in the past have had their own issues. There could be similarities in why they failed when you compare that to what is happening now. In the past, you saw personality clashes also. During the 1997 elections, for example, the Grand Alliance, which had Honorable Cletus Watterson as the chairman of that collaboration, and Alaric Tokba, very youthful, as the vice president of Kennedy at that time. You also saw it breaking apart because of institutional or personality clashes. And you see the same thing happening here during this coalition. The only other coalitions that really held together in Liberian politics, we cannot say all coalitions failed, was the Grand Coalition of 1985. Okay. That coalition was not formed during the election, it was formed after the 1985 election, and it was formed primarily bringing together UP, LAP, the Liberian Unification Party. As you will know, LPP, which is the Liberian People's Party, and UPP were banned by the Dole government at the time, so they didn't participate in the elections. But it brought all of those parties together post-election to advocate for re-election. That Grand Coalition held until the Civil War erupted.
Well, maybe at that time we were not in an election year. Maybe that's why it held. I mean, that is something I'm throwing out there. But let me ask you, Dr. Yan, quickly. Did this CPP, I want to put an adjective to it, this month failure actually helped President We Are Here to getting him a much better and comfortable position? Did the CPP do We Are a favor politically here?
Well, objectively speaking, if you have an incumbent president who has to his command, particularly our kind of governments that we have in Africa, Liberia to be specific, that has to care the government resources and allot to itself, millions of dollars in the presidential budget, then allotting such to the counties or the various schools that quote unquote are given free education. And then on the other hand, you have an opposition group that is fragmented and has disenfranchised itself. Then you build a road that is leading to that incumbent being a possible re-elected president. But he has to work for that. It's not the end of the road. There can be alignment and realignment post-CPP. And that is where I think that the opposition politicians should now focus. That realignment should bring into question party philosophy, parties that understand one another, parties that believe they can work with one another based on particular design principles and objectives. That objective not necessarily meaning removing just this president, but what you have as a program to rebuild the country, to upgrade education, to rebrand the country as our country's image has been damaged regionally, locally, continentally, and internationally. What do you have as a program for agriculture? What do you have for rebuilding the economy as a whole? What do you have for Liberianization? What do you have in your program? If we agree on these things and many other more, then we can go towards seeing who is better placed to head such a coalition, such an alliance, such a united group. So those are the steps that I think, on the other hand, a group coming together in the future will need to look at.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Yan. We are about to go into our final segment here, folks. In cyberspace, you're watching Focus on Liberia. This is our program, The Hour of Politics, and I am your humble host. This is an exclusive with Liberian scientist and politician and activist, Duba Chris Yan. Folks, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, the final segment of this exclusive with Dr. Yan, we'll be talking about this social democrat / progressive community in Liberia that Dr. Yan is from. What are they doing? The CPP is a letdown now. President Weah is cut loose. He's enjoying himself. We hear music every time. He's balling. He's living his best life. We see the budget. More money in his pocket and toe covered hands in his government. They are ready to battle it out for 2023. The CPP, like I said, is not there for us. They have failed us miserably. Where can we look? There is a group in our community called the Progressive, where Dr. Yan is from. They say they are not greedy. They have the experience. They have the track record. They've been in the trenches. They know what it means to be nationalistic and patriotic. What are they up to? I don't even hear them. Where are they? We don't even know. We'll come back. Dr. Yan will be taking some tough questions from me, and he knows I don't jab when it comes to the progressive. Even though I love them so much, but I think they are dragging their feet for the country they claim to love. We will be right back.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jah.
Dennis Jah, thank you. I'm Ansony Sieh with my guest, Dr. Duba Chris Yan, a progressive, a scientist, politician, and activist, and we are talking about country, Liberia. Dr. Yan, let's get started here with our final segment here quickly. The progressive community is one community in Liberia that we are all proud of, despite whatever criticism we may have. We rely on you guys for the experience. Where is the progressive community that you are part of? 2023 is coming. What is in the works by this community to help save this country, Liberia?
We are the social democratic forces in Liberia,
okay,
and we form part of the Continental Social Democratic Progressive contingent on the continent of Africa and around the world.
Mm-hmm.
The progressive social democrats in Liberia throughout history have demonstrated to be the most sincere, the most hardworking, the most committed, and we demonstrated that over and over. We don't demand credit, but history has credited us. Individuals who have their own problems and have corrupted the lives of our people are the ones who utilize criticism against the progressives only to becloud the people's thinking and meeting themselves in power. We have been carefully following the situation. As I have said in past interviews, we created this democratic space, which we fought for with our sweat and blood, to allow multi-party democracy. And that's what we have today. And that is why you have President we are elected today. That's why you have President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. That's why you had Charles Taylor. All of those elections were participated in by a lot of political parties. We had the elections of 1985, which was rigged by President Doe. That was participated in by multiple parties. We have achieved what we wanted to achieve. We are still fighting for press freedom. We are still fighting for uplifting the lot of our people. We did not create this space to monopolize it. Otherwise, we would have been the only one on the stage. Now that other people have taken up the stage and they have gone into leadership, the Liberian people have clearly seen the colorations of each and every political actor and group at this point. We've seen people coming together and we're unable to create a union. The factors you and I know and the Liberian people know what led to its destruction, final destruction. Mm-hmm. The progressives have been organizing very quietly, and I'll continue to tell you, we are watching the show and we are coming out. We have been discussing, we have been meeting, and it has been a stealth operation.
Dr. Yan, you say you have been watching the show quietly. Politics is not a spectator sport. And what you're actually saying is you are spectating. How would this idea of spectating and working quietly, politics is noisy? Do you agree?
It depends on the kind of noise you make. Mm-hmm. During the times of our advocacy, from the time of Wilma Blyden through Dido Torres, the Bacchus Matthews, Kipote, Sawyer, Fambule, etc., coming down to Alaris Topa, New Mission, the names go on. And to our generation, including myself, mm-hmm. we made qualitative noise.
See? You see, Dr. Yang? Hold on, Dr. Yang. You see? Hold on, Dr. Yang. Hold on. Let me hold you there. You make noise. Noise in a positive sense. I will agree with you.
Yes.
And so you were recognized by our people. Our people could see you in the trenches. You were the one they were looking at. They were counting on you. But now, you're not making that noise, Dr. Yan. You know who's making the noise? CDC is making the noise, CDC won. CPP have been making some noise. They want some seats. You are not making the noise. Your response?
That brings me right back to the point that I made, that we created a platform not to monopolize it.
But to compete, right?
Yes. Others took over, they made noise. But what is the quality of the noise they made? They made all the promises. Are they living up to the promises today?
Dr. Yan, you first must win.
They said they will carry this country forward on a better economic start from.
I agree. But Dr. Yan, you first one made the winning noise. You first one made the winning noise, and that is the winning noise you are not making. And that is my point. So will we see you making that winning noise soon? Because elections next year.
As I promised you some time ago,
right?
You've recently seen what the National Democratic Coalition has done.
I've read that extensively.
That we were working quietly. We have reconstituted and restructured our leadership. We have actively assessed and analyzed the body politic of the country, the contemporary politics in its opposition and the ruling coalition. We have a dossier of information on what happened, what needs to be done. We are going to Congress in early 2022. The United States North American branch, which is the diaspora branch of the National Democratic Coalition, which is the oldest coalition in the country presently, of which I am part, met in the state of Pennsylvania and mapped out a plan and proposed that to the national leadership on the ground. And these meetings, when they are held, the national leadership is also involved in these meetings. So we are holding a Congress in 2022. We're then restructuring and reactivating all ourselves. We're carrying out cabinet training sessions. Those will be amplified. We are carrying out advocacy, voters education, and we don't have to come out every day, singing these songs. But you can see the results that these activities are producing. So that's our present plan, and our interest is to unite the social democratic and other political entities that are interested in a real and formidable coalition.
Dr.
Not just a coalition that will go towards personality fights again.
Thank you. That was the question I'm about to ask, and I'm glad you answered that you're going to put up a united front as a progressive social democratic progressive community, that you put up a single candidate. That's what I'm getting from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, and you will do that through a collaboration. We see Tiawan. He is a member of that community. I know community we say he's in another political party. Are you suggesting that there is a possibility that some work being done to see all of you come under one umbrella to participate in the 2023 general and presidential elections?
As I have stated before, political scientists and social scientists alike who have studied the Liberian situation will tell you that the progressive community is not a monolithic community. It's pretty diverse, and it has improved and changed over time. You have some of the work done by the progressive in the past have produced actors that are in very political parties today. If you took away all the progressives that are in these various political parties, including the very CDC, these parties will fall. The progressives are the engine running these parties, and the parties know that. I will not go towards naming people, but it is obvious.
All right.
Now, that gives us a good foundation upon which we can unite not only people who claim to be quote-unquote progressive or parties that are labeled progressive, but to also utilize that opportunity to bring together all the other political parties that will be interested in a unity of purpose for the country, putting Liberia first, defining a united objective for moving the country forward, and at that stage, creating the conditions to put forth a united candidate or ticket in the general and presidential election, specifically, and in the legislative and senatorial elections as well.
Dr. Yan, time is fast spent, and you know we always reach out to you when we need to have you speak on these national issues. And so we will be ending here quickly, but I have to ask these two questions. You said social democrats, that is not common in our community. I may know one or two about it. So for my listening audience, when you say the progressive are the social democrats, social democratic progressive, I want you to take a few seconds to break that down for us. And then finally, I also want to know, you said there's this convention that coming up in this 2022 LA, sometime in Liberia, with Dr. Dube Chris Yan be participating in that process to get on the ticket of the progressive community in 2023, whichever way.
In the political landscape, and political scientists and social scientists alike will tell you that there are various political tendencies. You have conservatives, you have progressives, you have the liberals, and of course you can subdivide that to center left, center right, etc., etc. In Liberia, it was clearly known that you had a government in power, which was a military government or an autocratic government, and then you had those advocates that were reaching out to the people to advocate for multi-party democracy, advocate for high standards in education, free education, advocate for freedom of the press, advocate for good agricultural basis of the country so that the country could feed itself, advocated for workers' rights, those who produce the wealth of the country to be compensated equally or equitably for free health care. These are the characteristics that define the social democrats, who we call the progressives.
Thank you.
If you look in the United States today, you see that discussion between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. You look in the Democratic Party, you see the progressive wing in the Democratic Party that has been pushing mostly for the lot of the people to be improved, for health care, universal health care, for free education, meaning that college level education should be free. They've been pushing for good agriculture, for the minorities. They're fighting for minority rights, etc., etc. So you can see all of these similarities. Okay. So for our people, that's what the progressive social democrats, that social democracy, which you have in Europe today, Germany, Britain, Sweden, the Scandinavian countries, those are all social democratic countries, socialist countries, if you can put it that way. That's what it is. And that's what the National Democratic Coalition is about. That's our philosophy. And that's what we want to see happening in Liberia for our people to live a life that is equitable to the wealth that is produced. Good healthcare, good education, good agricultural basis of the country so that we can feed ourselves, a good and sustainable economy, Liberianization, Pan-Africanism, etc., etc.
And Dr. Yan, the final portion of my question, I want to simplify as much as I can. Is Dr. Dube Chris Yan running or will be running or intend to run for president comes 2022, and so will participate in the NDC processes to selecting candidates?
I had a right to run for any elected office based on my constitutionally guaranteed right.
So that's a yes.
I have participated in all of the congresses that have been held of the New Deal movement and National Democratic Coalition, and will participate in the coming Congress. What people always fail to do is going through the proper democratic process for being selected or elected as a candidate. And that's what we saw happening during the course of this coalition process that had clashes between candidates and how these candidates were selected. In our process, we hope that it can be a different one, that a primary system will be put in place, and whoever wins then can be put forth. But our primary interest is not going to the Congress to select candidates. It is going to the Congress to coin or cap our reorganizing process, and then extending our hands to all the other political parties for us to come together to build a united front. Upon that foundation, will we then select a single candidate or a ticket that will then go forward to election?
Thank you, Dr. Yan. So, Dr. Yan, we are out of time here. If I should write a news article after this interview to say Dr. Yan will be running for president, will I be doing injustice to your thoughts expressed here? Yes or no?
Anybody can write what they want to write according to their opinion, according to what they have heard. I respect press freedom, and I will not resist or go against any topic or title that anyone puts up.
All right.
It's left with the press, it's left with the institution to design their caption.
All right. Dr. Yan, again, we want to say thank you for always accepting our invitation here at Focus on Liberia, and in some instances, reaching out to us to share your thoughts on some of the national issues. We'll give you 30 seconds to conclude. And what do you have to leave with our Liberian people? You, the politicians, will always say we are at a crossroad. What do we do now that we are at this crossroad? Elections coming.
The world is currently at a major crossroad in the first place with the pandemic.
Okay.
That should claim our primary concern, even as politicians and as advocates. As a professional medical doctor and a scientist, I will call on our people to continue to wear your mask. As I told you in those three sermons that I gave with the 4 commandments of COVID-19 prevention, that shall wear your mask, that shall get vaccinated and boosted, that shall keep your social distance, and that shall wash and sanitize your hands. Coming to the political stage, let us unite our people. That's a fundamental thing, be it opposition or government. Our country is so divided, and the continent as well is divided. Unity is the bedrock. In rectifying the situation in our country, I will call on all opposition entities to see reason to accept our invitations, whether verbal, written, or otherwise, to sit on the round table to come to a conclusion of producing a united front. We are calling for uniting the people. And so we should first be united as a sign of we uniting our people. So I hope that they will see the reason with the breakdown of this current coalition, CTP, that a reconfiguration of forces will bring together like-minded political entities that will unite our people.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Yan. It was good having you today. And like I said earlier, we may have to get back to you when we see the need to do so as new issues, come up in our country. Thank you for coming, Doctor.
Thank you very much for having me on your show again. And I'm willing anytime. Happy New Year again.
Happy New Year, Dr. Yan, and bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, folks, that will do it on this exclusive interview with Dr. Duwell Chris Yan. Yeah, I focus on Liberia. We educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We talk about the fight against the world coronavirus crisis that continue. We talk about Liberian political actors and presidential elections 2023, meaning that preparations by political actors and parties for election 2023 in Liberia. And finally, we talk about the Social Democrat Progressive Community in election 2023 and Dr. Yan having to be a part of that. This is how we will come to the end of this interview here at Focus on Liberia. And I'm Ansony Sieh. who brought you this exclusive on the Hour of Politics. Focus on Liberia. We educate, we elevate, we promote all things Liberia. We want to say we can't read comments because there was merely an exclusive with Dr. Yan. That is how we planned it, and this is how we have decided to execute it. As always, we can say thank you so very much for being part of all we do here at Focus on Liberia. Criticize us, make recommendation so that we can do better for you and not waste your time, because the time you spend to listening to us, we want you to value it. We value it, and we want to make good use of that time. Thank you for watching. The sun says we are all Liberians, and that sun is taking us home. Until I catch you again, I'm working on something. I might do an analysis late tonight on this Cummings case that he was, sent to court. That was the writ of arrest, and he made a statement. I might do an analysis tonight. I will try to make it juicy if I succeed in putting that all together. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye from us.
We are Liberian.